My grandfather, George LeBrun, came in 1884 to Canada from the island of Jersey.
Where did he come from?
He came from the little island of Jersey Island, which is situated in the English Channel on the north coast of France. It's only a little island about 8 miles by 12 miles long. They have mostly 4 seasons a year of farming, and their livelihood is based on farming and a certain amount of fishing.
What was your grandfather's job?
When he came to Canada, he came as a young boy who was engaged as a clerk working for the company of Charles Robin Collis, the Jersey company, who had international trade between Jersey Island and Canada, different bases they had in Canada, from the Gaspé, Cheticamp, or Eastern Harbor as it was known in those days, and Bay St. Lawrence, and Arichat, and down to, they used to go down to the West Indies and do trade. That's the certain type of trade they did then.
What was your grandfather's job?
He was working originally as a clerk, and later on in life, when he brought his family over, he was the first immigrant from Jersey who was able to bring his wife, and he settled in Eastern Harbor, and he became a farmer. He had a store also. He used to do selling goods and buying fish and different things like that. That was originally how he became an immigrant to Canada.
What do you know about your grandfather's childhood days?
Well, all I know is that he was a young boy educated in the island of Jersey. He grew up in the environment there, which was back in the 1800s, were restricted to farm life. And I don't know too much. He played soccer and cricket and went to school and stayed around home mostly because there was nothing much more to do as a boy.
How did people travel in your grandfather's time, and how long did it take?
I didn't understand.
How did people travel in your grandfather's time, and how long did it take?
Oh, in Eastern Harbor, the original travel was by horse and wagon or horseback, and for a distance, say from the point of the island where they had their original establishment to the harbor, which is a distance about 8 miles. It took a full day to go there and back again. The other places they used to go through was go across the mountains to Margrie, and that was a 2 to 3 day trip.
When were you born and where?
I was born in the little town of Eastern Harbor, and on my birth certificate that's the name of the town, but it is now being changed to the name of Cheticamp, C-H-E-T-I-C-M-P. It's located on the north shore of Cape Breton, up where what is known as the Cabot Trail. And it's a little harbor town on a harbor facing the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
How did you get your food, and what kind of food did you eat? Like a typical meal.
Well, first of all, in those days there was very little communication with the outside world, so you had all the people there had to survive by having their own farms. They used to grow in the fields in the summer. They'd grow potatoes and cabbage and carrots and things, that kind of root crops mostly. with some corn and peas and beans for dried food they could dry for the winter. And those were some of the basic. Wheat was grown also to make into very coarse flour, or porridges, which they used to eat. They grew oats and other grains to feed the cattle and pigs. And in the winter, in the fall of the year, when the cold weather was coming, they'd kill their beef, which could be kept in cold storage on kind of cold weather. But when it got warm, they had to salt, so we ate a lot of salt meat in the summer. Eggs, chicken didn't lay eggs during the winter, during the cold weather, so they had to be kept in crocks under conditions called what we call water glass storage. It was a liquid that we put over the eggs to keep the oxygen up. These eggs, as the longer they kept, became quite strong in taste, but they were very good for cooking. And that kind of if you ate them, you had to use spices to get over the strong taste that they had. So the only fruit we had was apples, wild berries that we picked, and what else? There was cherries, and they used to make their wine from cherries and make preserves, a lot of jams. That was the kind of food we had. What was the other question you asked us?
Was there supermarkets?
No, there was no supermarkets. There was the little country store, and you got all your goods that you need to maintain your farm, and tools came from there. Remember that any communication with the outside world was only by steamer, which brought in the freight in the summer. So you had to make sure that all this stuff that you might need in the winter was got during the summertime. There was no, everybody made their own bread, everybody made what they need. It was only the things that they couldn't make. They used to make their own soap by getting fats, and you boil it in a big cauldron outside, and you used lye to cause the fat to turn into a soap, caustic soda. And there was no perfume soap that you get today. So this was the kind of things that you had to live under, which was sort of very basic needs.
How did you get your clothes?
Get my what?
Clothes.
Oh, clothes were, again, fabricated either by, cloth was fabricated by weaving. There was mostly woolen clothes, which was made from sheep wool, and leather, which was from horsehide or cowhide or deer hide. Shoes, most shoes were made what we call moccasins, and they were made from horsehide. There was also sealskins used for the different fancy leather and goods. Big coats, heavy coats were generally always knitted clothes, wool clothes.
Tell me the difference between your farm as well and like the water lights and...
Well, in heating was, the modern house was heated by hot water systems, heated by wood fires, and the water circulated by convection, and there was no electric motors to make it go round. There was no electricity to have lights, so you had either kerosene lights or gasoline lights or even candles. That was in the pioneer days. When the windows, for instance, were not double windows; they were just single pane windows. If you modern house did make a type of double window which was installed in the fall and taken off in the spring. There was no air conditioning. Most houses were made of shingles and things like that. And they were comfortable, but not luxurious as you have today. The bedding, for instance, was often made of duck down feathers to make your mattress. Originally, there used to be only straw we used to use in mattresses, and things were pretty rough then. Get to every fall, you had to change the straw, so you had good fresh straw in your mattress.
Describe a typical day in your life as a boy.
Oh, we were always interested in playing outside and looking adventure, going up into the trails, into the mountains, fishing, trout fishing, salmon fishing. We used to go sailing on boats. My father had a nice rowboat which we used to use a lot. We used to go fishing lobsters, what we call drags, which you're not allowed to do now. There was always plenty of shorefish, clams, and digging clams, things like that. Swimming, always swimming off the wharf. We had lots of fun in the summer. In the wintertime, we played hockey with sticks, and we didn't always have a puck, but sometimes we only had a stone to actually play on the ice. One thing I forgot to mention is we used to have a long stick, and it was, I think it was called the snake drive, and you'd make a groove on the snow and you throw it. It was a game that was learnt from the Indians, and the stick would slide in this groove for long distances, and we'd see who would go the furthest. These were the types of things. Snowshoeing was a great adventure. Also, I had the lovely big dog we used to use for sleigh riding. We'd tackle him up to the sleigh, and he'd take us across through the woods. And we were only 6 and 8 years old, my brother and I. We used to go right 4 or 5 miles through the woods, sleigh dog. Those were some of the things we. The other things we made was making cabins in the woods and playing hide and seek. We'd go picking berries when there was berries. These are the things we did.
What kind of games did you play?
I just mentioned hockey and some football, soccer, I guess we call it. Some of the games we played. Played cards in the winter, and it was mostly adventure fishing and things like that we went in for.
What were your toys like, and what was your favorite?
Toys were generally self-made. You had to make your own. We used to have little boats. We used to sail on the lakes, and one of my favorite toys was a little car made out of wheels were made from logs which were sawed into wheels, and we had it made so that there was a 2 to an axle, and this was attached to a stick which was used for steering. We used to pretend this was a car, and because it was self-made, we enjoyed it. But I guess it was later on when I was growing up. I was about 9, 10, I think. My father bought me a tricycle. It was the first tricycle in the town. I was pretty proud of it. And of course, everybody wanted to drive it, so I used to charge them if they had a candy or something. They could stay on the bicycle longer than those that didn't have anything.
Who were the most important people in the town, and why?
Oh, well, in the town, the church had I went to a convent, and the nuns were looked at very important because they were the religious group that guided you, and the priest was the very important. It's a little town that most of the education came from the people that had a good education. There was very few of them. There was also some store managers and some politicians who the families depended on to bring some political money into the town and to get things done that you wanted done in that town. Even though we were isolated, there was no libraries, so we had to, a few books were got. My grandfather had a great collection of books. Because for him to survive, he had to, as he grew older and to run his farm, he had to do all the doctoring of these animals. He had to know about law, to know how to regulate his business. And he was a great writer, beautiful writer. He was able to, when he signed his name in something, the author, when he signed his name, he'd end with drawing a picture of a fish. That was to advertise his business of buying and selling fish.
Was sleeping in an owl and why?
With what?
Was sleeping in an owl and then and why?
I'd say life was friendlier in the old days because everybody depended on their neighbor for survival. If a farmer lost his barn due to a fire by lightning, the neighbors would come and build a barn for him. They'd go and cut the woods and saw the wood and prepare and build a farm. If there was somebody that was sick and couldn't look after his farm, the neighbors would go and farm, make all the farming, cut the crops, bring them in, and look after the cattle while he was sick, and give him any help that he needed. There was a lot of sharing between people and families. And therefore you had to always be a good neighbor. You never thought of hurting anybody. Always tried to help. And that's how a lot of people survived. In that way, there was a closeness between people that you don't find today. Entertainment, you had to make your own entertainment. You had to, like you used to have chivalries, picnics. Chivalries was a sort of a gathering that they had when young people got married. They had all kinds of fun, had big suppers. There was a lot of people could play music, like mostly fiddling, and dances, square dances was the things people enjoyed. So there was more sharing things together than I think there is today.
What was the most important thing your father or grandfather taught you?
What is the most important thing?
Your father or grandfather taught you?
Well, there are religious people, and used to read the Bible regularly. They used to make me, as a child, every night I had to say my prayers before I went to bed. And they taught me to share things with people, respect people. If you did that, people would respect you. Always try to help. Those, I think, were the big impressions that stayed in my life, that my mom and dad taught me, that to have big respect for God.
Thank you for this interview.
You're welcome. Pleased to talk to you.